In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most wise. 2 centuries ago, the Ummah stood at a crossroads, not of disbelief and belief, but of weakness and renewal. Its lands stretched from the heart of Africa to the mountains of Asia. Yet within, rebellion, corruption, and foreign deceit had crept into its veins. And at that time, Allah raised a ruler who would carry the burden of restoring order when the empire itself bring apart Sultan Mahmud II, son of Sultan Abdul Hamid I. He was not born into peace, but into crisis. The walls of Istanbul echoed with revolt. The Janissaries, once the defenders of Islam, had become unruly and corrupt, obeying neither Sultan nor Sharia, serving their own desires instead of Allah and His Messenger. When Sultan Mahmud was still a youth, they rose against the throne. Fire consumed the capital, and treachery filled the palace halls. It was not a foreign enemy that threatened the caliphate that day, it was the betrayal within. Deitama Alindar Mustafa Vinovinreska. He marched to the capital with faith in his heart, determined to save the caliphate from collapse. By the decree of Allah, he overthrew the rebels and placed the young Mahmud upon the throne, restoring rightful rule. But the Janissaries did not repent. They raged again, fearing the loss of their privilege. Alemdar faced them one last time, standing firm inside the sublime port. And when the traitors breached the gates, the Pasha refused to surrender. He lit the powder magazines beneath him, giving his life as a martyr so that the caliphate might live. Mahmud survived that fire, but he never forgot it. He had seen with his own eyes how corruption and disobedience could destroy an empire. From that day, eswortat, Beidris will he no matter the cost. But before he could rebuild, a great trial appeared from the south, the first Wahhabi uprising. In the Arabian Peninsula, a new sect had seized the holy cities of Makkah and Medina, desecrating the shrines, breaking the tombs, and spreading confusion among the Muslims. They disrupted the Hajj, and the cries of the pilgrims reached Istanbul. Sultan Mahmud could not bear the thought that the Haramain, the 2 sanctuaries of Islam, were under such desecration. He commanded his governor in Egypt, Muhammad Ali Pasha, to restore the sanctity of the Holy Lands. Muhammad Ali obeyed. He sent his son, Tosun Pasha, at the head of a disciplined army, who crossed the Red Sea and entered the Hejaz. The first battles were fierce. The Wahhabi fighters were well entrenched in the deserts of Najd, but the will of Allah was with the believers. The Egyptian troops, fighting under the banner of the Caliph, recaptured Makkah, then Medina, and reopened the roads for Hajj. Later, Muhammad Ibrahim Pasha, to pursue the rebellion deeper into the heart of Najd. He marched across the deserts, defeating the rebel city by city until they reached their stronghold, Diriyah, the center of their movement. After a long and bitter siege, Diriyah fell by Allah's permission. Its leader, Abdullah ibn Saud, was taken to Istanbul and brought before the Sultan. There, before the Caliph, he was judged for the blood of the pilgrims and the crimes committed in the Haramain. justice was done, and the keys of Makkah and Medina were formally returned to the Sultan, a moment of divine victory and relief across the Muslim world. The holy cities were purified once more, the call to prayer echoed freely, and peace returned to the land of revelation. But peace in the Ummah would not last long. The Janissaries, bitter and proud, continued to challenge the Sultan's authority. Every dust terrosisted. Every call to discipline they mocked. For years, the Sultan bore their arrogance with patience. He sent scholars to teach, rebuilt schools and mosques, and restructured the army upon the discipline of the early Muslims, yet still they rebelled. At last, in the year 1826, Sultan Mahmud saw that patience alone would not preserve the empire. He gathered his loyal soldiers, placed his trust in Allah, and struck decisively. The Janissary barracks were surrounded, and when the rebels refused to lay down their arms, they were destroyed. It was a day of both grief and deliverance, a chapter that history remembers as the auspicious incident. The Sultan mourned those who had died astray, but he knew that justice must prevail for the Ummah to live. With their tyranny ended, the empire began to breathe again. Mahmud rebuilt the institutions of the caliphate, schools of law and language, new systems of justice, and the training of armies founded upon discipline, not rebellion. He sent scholars across the lands to revive knowledge and re-establish the Waqf, foundations that had supported the poor and the seekers of ilm for centuries. He renewed the maintenance of the roads to Makkah and Medina and rebuilt the wells and stations that served the pilgrims. He commanded the restoration of mosques from Damascus to Baghdad and worked tirelessly to ensure that the name of Allah was raised high once again across the realm. Sultan Mahmud's reforms were not imitation of Europe, as the outsiders falsely claim. They were the revival of Islamic order rooted in justice, consultation, and mercy. He was not seeking to copy the West. He was striving to restore what the Ummah had once perfected through faith, discipline, and knowledge. But his life was one of constant trial. From the wars of rebellion to the whispers of foreign agents, he carried a burden heavier than most could bear. Yet he never abandoned his faith, nor his duty to Allah and his people. As his years grew old, illness began to weigh upon him. Even in pain, he attended to affairs of the caliphate, signing decrees and meeting scholars. He would often say, "The ruler must live in service van Zuidwest." In the year 1839, after decades of struggle and reform, Sultan Mahmud II returned to his lord. He left behind no palaces of pleasure, only the legacy of a man who bore the burdens of the Ummah in its weakest hour and sought to rebuild it upon the foundation of justice and faith. He was laid to rest in Istanbul beside his ancestors. His tomb visited by scholars and soldiers alike, not as a conqueror, but as a ruler who faced the storm and never turned his back. His reign marked not an end, but a beginning.